Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with a discussion about the vampire counts in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. The vampire counts are likely to be one of the next DLC races after Tides of Torment comes out, either as part of a standalone DLC with Neferata as the Legendary Lord, or as part of a different DLC that CA will be doing next year. I think vampire counts are in an interesting spot as a race because they have aged remarkably well, but they could certainly use the DLC for new stuff. So looking at the situation of vampire counts in the game, let's talk about what they do good and where they could really use some help. The obvious things to focus on with regards to any rework is building tiers, economy, research, all that good stuff. And this is where I think vampire counts could really use some benefits. Because for instance, you have a tier 1 barracks, then a tier 3 barracks. There's nothing in between. You have a tier 1 and then a tier 3 economic building. The money is there, the units are there, but clearly there are limitations. I mean, maybe Graveguard should just become a tier 2 unit. The ones with shields, and then you could recruit halberds and grey weapons at tier 3. That would just be a perspective on the subject. Sure, Graveguard are pretty good, all things considered, but maybe reducing the tier would make sense. Or maybe not. They have good stats, but they do have the downside of being an undead unit, so they don't rout in battles, they're vulnerable to fire, and they disintegrate when they quote-unquote die. So there's pros and cons with playing vampires in general. Then with regards to the research tree, it's a very outdated research tree. It does work, for the record, but there's a lot of things here that don't really matter as much. There are absolutely things that do. For instance, Alamian Book of Blood is the first thing you want to get in every campaign, and then you got things like allegiance points, things like diplomatic relations with all factions. Vampires are really good at diplomacy, not with all factions, but with a significant number of them. But their economy works. They just need some changes. They need changes with hero recruitment, unit recruitment, all that kind of stuff. Just the usual, right? Then we have to talk about the bloodline situation. The bloodlines are great from one perspective in that they give you various different benefits. For instance, diplomatic relations with all human factions, character experience, blood dragon arts, as another example. Then there's stuff that's not so useful given the context of Warhammer 3, like Von Karstein Dark Arts. You have plenty of heroes with casualty replenishment, control is not really an issue, and getting a couple of Sylvanian crossbowmen and handgunners is not especially great. So some changes could be in order, balancing changes over here with the bloodlines, but also how you gain blood kisses. Because let's put it like this. Using a character to assassinate another character just to get a resource is not a great system in the context of Warhammer 3. Yes, you do have a lot of heroes, undeniably so, but the fact that you're relying on character assassinations to get these blood kisses to unlock these heroes just makes for a bit of an annoying campaign dynamic. Again, even though you do have a lot of heroes available to you when you're playing a Vampire Counts campaign. I just look at this hero group and then look at my main army. There's plenty of heroes to spare, at least as Vlad or Isabella. Less so for others, but yeah, that's one of those things that, just a balance change. It works. Like, that's kind of the motto of the Vampire Counts. They work, but could use some improvements in terms of how they actually play given the dynamics of a campaign. I would, however, say the following. One of the issues they do have is with regards to vassalization. Again, not because it doesn't work. In fact, that's kind of the problem. It works perhaps a bit too well. It is very, very easy to get a faction to vassalize with you for just a simple territory. Incredibly easy, incredibly simple as a system, not a problem, nothing like that. So we can work with that in the context of a campaign. But that's just kind of the limitation of the vassal system in itself. It's like, oh, you vassalize. Like, for instance, I vassalized Ungarum playing Vlad or Isabella by just taking Grand Peak before him, building a barracks, and then selling that to him. The way vassalizations are working and the way they're handled should be improved, and it's not just an issue for vampire counts, it's an issue for Slaanesh, it's an issue for Warriors of Chaos. It's actually an issue for any kind of race that does rely on it. Vampire counts don't need to rely on it, but it is a lot of power, it's a lot of money. It means other factions won't declare war on you, which, given your starting position over here as Vlad and Isabella, is pretty important, because otherwise you might end up being vulnerable to so many different factions. But again, those are relatively minor issues in the grand scheme of things. Adding more units, heroes, lore choice, updates on that would be great. Because, yeah, the unit roster is feeling very stale at this point, even with free stuff like Graveguard with Halberds. Also updating the unit icons, because you look at the Graveguard with Halberd versus the regular Graveguard, yeah, you can feel the age of some of this stuff over here, and just unit textures, unit models, that kind of stuff. Another problem, though, the bigger problem, is the Legendary Lords themselves. Because you have Vlad, Isabella, Manfred, Gorst, and Kemmler. Gorst kind of represents the fundamental issue of the vampire counts. They're great to play from a power perspective, but they're boring. The reason they're boring has to do with a couple of things. You have a lot of units you can get for raised dead. Gorst especially can get a lot of free zombies that are, or very cheap zombies that are incredibly powerful, undeniably so. And they're factional-wide powerful, but playing battles with zombies is one of the most boring things you could experience in a Total War campaign. And that's kind of the dynamic all vampire counts have in all their campaigns. Because, again, your units disintegrate, they don't rout when they're destroyed, so the best way to play a lot of the times, especially if you're outnumbered, is rely on your super powerful lords and heroes and the large numbers of them that you have. Necromancers for everyone, vampires for Vlad and Isabella, all that kind of stuff. Really, Vlad and Isabella, like Isabella especially, 25% weapon strength for embedded vampire heroes is ridiculous, and that's not the only benefit she gets. She also gets more hero capacity for them, which is a very big deal, and then you get melee attack and melee defense for embedded vampire heroes, and Vlad and Isabella can solo end-game armies from very early on in the campaign. What more do you want to say? But just playing battles where you're sending your heroes and lords to kill everything while the rest of the army is doing nothing, because why take the damage? Heroes and lords heal and battle. They also replenish faster on the campaign map, and they don't affect your faction strength, in the sense that if they're damaged, the way AI makes decisions is based on how strong you are diplomatically. So having more troops is going to affect having more vassals, but if your lords and heroes take damage, it might affect it, but nowhere near as much as, say, losing half your army, which, by the way, you can very easily. It's especially bad given the siege situation, because, yeah, you can lose a lot of troops in sieges, given the way they're designed for vampire counts, and the fact that they don't have ways of breaking down walls, they don't have artillery, they have only a handful of missile units. Yes, allied recruitment exists, but that's a band-aid, if anything else. So more units, ways of breaking walls, actually having a battle dynamic where you're encouraged to engage with your army as opposed to sitting with it safely in the back while Vlad and Isabella kill everything. I think that would be in order. And as I stated, Legendary Lords. Also, the Red Duke would be great as a free Legendary Lord. Those are the kind of things I would like to see improved, fixed for the vampire counts in a future DLC or a future update, race rework for them. More unique mechanics, better ways, by the way, of doing confederations, better battle dynamics.